Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And Baltimore Positive. We are celebrating spring around here, and we've had great conversations, wise conversations, we like to say, brought to you by our friends at Wise Markets. Picked up some berries this morning and some bananas as well, and I'm learning how to shop online with my friends there. Also, our friends at Faidley's, where they're shipping online crab cakes anywhere in the world. They're also shipping those crab cakes and their location as well out to Catonsville. They'll be doing that soon. I'm going to be doing the crab cake tour very soon as well. And let's not forget State Fair. State Fair is there in Catonsville as well with our friends at El Guapo. That is going to be our first stop outside under the tent. I hope we have an extension cord that's long enough to get us out there. But we're going to be doing something right around this time. We'll be telling you more about that in the weeks ahead. Don Moeller, we had such a long, lengthy chat last week. You bring these people on and you green room the hell out of them, and you tell them we're going to talk about one thing, and the next thing you know, you and I are fighting about the 1954 Orioles. So I'll give you a chance to at least welcome him in. You're on mute, by the way, Don. I know that's the word for the pandemic there, but good to see you again. How are you?
Oh, it's great. It's great to be back. And you're right. We had so much to talk about with our next guest, senior editor from Baltimore Magazine, Ron Cassie, that we didn't even get into the whole topic of gerrymandered districts and Republicans and Democrats in the state. And it's a pleasure to welcome back Ron Cassie. Ron, welcome back.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, not to go down that rabbit hole again, but today is actually the anniversary of the first game in Memorial Stadium in '54. April 15th was the opener.
Also, Jackie Robinson's birthday. Let's not let that slip by.
There you go. I will tell people, you talked about it last week on the show, and because I get and encourage folks to get the print edition because it's a great bargain out there. Go ahead and get a subscription.
Sticky pads up in the corner. He's such
a nerd. You love those stickies, but you had encouraged us to go on and look at the online story, and you had. Again, we're not going to spend the whole 30 minutes on the 1954 Orioles again, but you had vintage footage. It was almost like I was back as a little kid watching the newsreels, of the parade. How did you find that footage, Ron? That was just outstanding.
You just start looking everywhere you can once you get into the research phase, and just one thing kind of leads to the next, and the next thing you know, it's 2:30 in the morning, and you're watching you found a newsreel clip on YouTube. So,
well, I would think sports legends had access to a lot of that stuff over years to archive stuff and whatever. And the TV stations probably had the same little 20 seconds of it that they had kept through the years and it cycled back through or whatever. I'm always amazed at archival footage of all sorts of things, including my radio show that have gotten kept over the years. We brought you on last week to really take on something that's bubbled back up again. I guess it bubbles back up every time, one of these whack jobs down in D.C. on the right side, the Marjorie, whatever the hell her name is, and the one from out in Colorado. We have our own issue here. We had Heather Mazur on last month. I don't need to say it's a stretch for anybody out there to think that I would agree with Andy Harris. I don't talk about him much. We don't sit here and bash Republicans all day. There's television stations to do that. We're trying to fix the city. But across our politics, it's the strangest thing we have going here. And Don, go ahead. You can take it from there because I know you're looking for some sort of transition.
No, it is strange. And Ron, again, in the April edition, you wrote a terrific article called Seeing Red, and you try to put some historical context on that district. But sure enough, I swear, every time we sit down to do an interview with someone, some article comes across my phone that's relevant. It's almost as if the gods are looking at who we have scheduled to come on, and then something happens and it comes across my phone. So right before I sit down to interview you today, we sit down to have this chat, there's an article that says Andy Harris has joined Marjorie Taylor Greene in proposing Congressional Medals of Freedom to the police officers who fought the protesters in Portland, Oregon this summer, while opposing those for the Capitol Hill police officers who defended the Capitol on January 6th. I had to read it twice. I just I'm going to turn to you, Ron Cassie. Explain to us who Andy Harris is, because we have conservatives in Maryland. We have Larry Hogan, Republicans. We have Michael Steele, Republicans. We have Barry Glassman, Republicans. We have Alan Kittleman, Republicans. I can go down the list. We have David Marks, Republicans in Baltimore County. These really reasonable, fiscally conservative, traditional Republicans. It's the strangest thing, because I don't even think in Maryland's Republican Party they're where Andy Harris is. So take us behind the curtain and describe this guy to us a little bit.
Yeah, well, Andy Harris really is not just an anomaly that he's the only Republican representative now, in Congress from Maryland, only Republican. He's to the extreme far right of the Republican Party. Marjorie Greene Taylor, Lauren Boebert, who Nestor mentioned. When there's votes on benefits to first responders, he's in that group of like 5 or 6 out of 400 and some that oppose. We know, for example, the Congressional Medal of Honor that came up to honor the Capitol Police on January 6th. And again, he's one of like 8 or 10 out of 400 plus that oppose that. He skips the impeachment vote. He got caught trying to bring a gun essentially onto the floor of the House. He got into a scuffle that night, January 6th. There was, near scuffle, right? Like in the chamber. He's he's out there. I don't know how else to put it. He supports the Hungarian dictator Viktor Orban, and who's a Putin ally, and he won't say anything bad about Putin. So he's
how is that popular here? You know what I mean? Like, I know a couple of people that maybe you could sell that to, and maybe it's because I live in the city where 92% of the people voted against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out, even amongst my conservative friends, how this can be seen as leadership. That's the problem I've had at all of it. That I see leadership in various aspects. I mean, we had Michael Steele on. We had an hour-long conversation. We're getting a crab cake. I don't agree with him, but Andy Harris, I can't fathom sanctioning his voice on my program or on my FCC license, because it's not a phone call I would take. It's not an elevator ride I would get in.
Yeah, I mean, so we should say Andy Harris represents parts of the Baltimore metro region, right? He represents parts of Baltimore County, Hartford County, out to Carroll County, and the Eastern Shore, which for most Baltimoreans or Baltimore metro folks, people listen to your show, we go to the Eastern Shore regularly, especially, this time of year, right?
Buy a lot of produce from over there.
Yeah. And so how does he survive? I guess, one thing I'd say, as a leader, he's not really in leadership in the House, which is weird to say. By being a congressman, you assume somebody's a leader, and I guess he is, in Maryland, but he doesn't hold any leadership positions. He's only authored one significant piece of legislation, that was to prevent decriminalization of marijuana in DC. He is and I talked to, he's not in the story because we talked just shortly after we went to our printed. I talked to Bob Ehrlich about Andy Harris. Andy Harris, is a pro-gun, anti-abortion, no new taxes Republican. So he checks those kind of basic boxes on the right, and that's why he gets elected. He's very much pro-gun. We should say, anti any kind of gun buying restrictions. Right? Nobody's ever come.
I don't think he's done the press conference or the TikTok in front of all the machine guns right behind him, like the woman out in Colorado. Looks like something out of Saddam Hussein or Bin Laden's cave or something.
But Nestor, I would suggest that if Congresswoman Boebert, who you're referring to out there, who represents our good friend Damien O'Doherty, actually lives in her district, which is just, I think that's a head scratcher for him. But I think he would appear in that video with her. He'd be glad to do that. I want to circle back, Ron, to what you just said, because both Nestor and I have good relationships with former Governor Ehrlich. He was at Nestor's wedding, as Nestor always says.
Well, I had a good relationship till the last time I saw him, and I don't know so much. Last time I ran into him, I kind of told him how I felt about kids in cages and stuff like that. And
well, he went.
on that.
He decided to side with Donald Trump, which was a bit of a head scratcher. But what did the former governor say to you about Andy Harris? I'd be curious, because they've known each other a long time.
Part of the piece was just kind of documenting Andy Harris's really kind of like far right behavior, in the January 6th stuff, and since. The other part of it was basically what enables him to keep winning elected office, which is our extreme gerrymandering in Maryland. And the third part of the story was, it seems like the GOP in Maryland, like nationally, is either going to tip further towards Harris or more towards a Larry Hogan, in style and presentation. And, Bob Ehrlich is a lifelong friend of Governor Hogan's, very close still. And he also is a big Trump supporter and Andy Harris supporter. So to Governor Ehrlich, this stuff is none of this is make or break. The Republican Party is pro-gun, anti-abortion, no taxes, and eventually the stuff of January 6th and some of the extremist stuff don't make a difference. That they're not going. People are not going to leave the Republican Party, so to speak, over an Andy Harris. The majority aren't. They're going to coalesce around their shared values. I mean, I'm kind of skipping to the end, but that's kind of conclusion that Governor Ehrlich reaches. And I think, in a sense, you can see that there's some truth in that already, right? I mean, in terms of the bill in Congress for the pandemic relief bill that was just passed, right? It was done completely without any Republican support at all. And in fact, Governor Hogan said he, most likely would have voted against it as well if he was in Congress. So it's still, an issue that needs to be resolved, you would think, in the Republican Party. They're going to continue lurching, this really kind of far right Donald Trump extremism, or they're going to move a little bit back towards the center, at least in tone and style, and sign on to some bipartisan legislation.
Ron, I don't think we beat up the Democrats enough around here, but the gerrymandering thing, for sure. Yeah. Any astute political observer would tell you that in this state, as much as what we see in Georgia with voting and the crap that they're trying to do down there, all sorts of racist stuff. But here, the gerrymandering really comes from the left side.
Yeah, and it's some of the most extreme in the country. And that was, one thing.
How did that happen? Play history for me. Act like you're a guy from Jersey, from Pennsylvania when you talk about this. So you can offend all of us. But the truth, how did this happen?
I'm going to go back very far for a moment because it's interesting. Gerrymandering comes from a former governor of Massachusetts and Declaration of Independence signer named Elbridge Gerry, who was a governor of Massachusetts and signed on to some crazy gerrymandering legislation.
Look at how happy Moeller is when this becomes a social studies course. Look at him. Look at how happy he is.
I used to teach Elbridge Gerry. I'm sitting back, and I thought
he's going through in the pink file next to Baltimore Magazine and looking through the notes. 1978, eighth grade.
I'm back. 1972. Social studies class, 9th grade, Lansdowne High School.
Ninth grade. Cassie. American Studies. I love it. All right.
I had good social studies teachers, Dom, but I didn't get Elbridge Gerry. So kudos to you, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So that's where gerrymandering comes from, Elbridge Gerry, 1812. So this stuff has been around. This is baked into our DNA, right? He's a sign of the Declaration. In Maryland, really take extreme shape under Governor O'Malley, who we essentially we had gone from a 4-4 state in Congress, right? We had Connie Morella, Roscoe Bartlett,
Bob Ehrlich,
and
Wayne Gilchrist.
Wayne Gilchrist, who really should be a part of this. It really was the guy Andy Harris replaced, and as really astute, reasonable guy. And environmentally conscious representative from the Eastern Shore. So O'Malley pushes forth an extreme map, and you're basically, traditionally this is done every 10 years at the census, And so to push us to a 7-1 state. Now the Democrats voting registration numbers is 2-1 in Maryland, but we have a 7-1 Democratic representation in Congress. And why does this matter? Well, one is you get an Andy Harris, because you put all the red eggs, the far eggs, into one basket. You only Andy Harris can win a Republican primary, and then, but you also limit really, the democracy and the voices of tens of thousands of Marylanders all across the state, because nobody has to speak to the middle. Nobody has to, coalition has to be wider, and so basically people are shut out almost in every district, right? Because all of the, this is a blue district, that's a red one. And as you guys know, Nestor, this is just writ large across the United States today. There's only a couple dozen out of 435 congressional districts, only 2 or 3 dozen that are truly like up for grabs anymore. And, Senator, of course, Larry Hogan wants to address this, and he is self-interested. And Majority Leader Bill Ferguson doesn't want to address this, and he has a self-interest. And it's hard to imagine.
Well, they're willing to live with Andy Harris.
Well, no,
point,
wait,
right?
no, wait. I'm going to jump in here now. This is good stuff, because I get into disagreements with a lot of my friends and neighbors all the time over this issue. The Congressman John Sarbanes, we love HR1 here on Baltimore Positive. If you're listening out there, Joe Manchin, we need to pass HR1. And if HR1 passes, it will rectify these kinds of crazy gerrymandered districts,
including Sarbanes' district,
including John's district, all over the country. The difference between the Republican approach, Ron, I would suggest, Governor Hogan's approach, which is, I would suggest, is disingenuous, is that they want the Democrats to unilaterally disarm. They want Democratic blue states who actually believe in commissions and drawing lines that are more representative of the state to do it, while Republican states continue to gerrymander their districts to create safe Republican districts. You can't, and I think what Senator Ferguson would say is, you can't have Maryland step up to the plate and not have Virginia and other states step up to the plate. So we need a federal solution. Did Democrats participate in gerrymandering these awful, awful districts? And it's not just Sarbanes' district. It's not just Andy Harris's district. Dutch's district is strange. They're all strange. So we need to fix it, but we need a federal solution. But I digress.
No, I don't think that's a digression. I think it's right on the money.
I agree with that.
And it has to be done federally, because otherwise Maryland's just unilaterally disarming. Part of it, the point of the story is, Maryland could be a leader, right? You could be a leader and be a state that does this first. You could try to work regionally with Virginia and Pennsylvania and West Virginia, with some of the red states to do it. We do that with air and water pollution issues, right? Work regionally to address those things. HR1, I'll tell you, Governor Ehrlich was vociferously, he was, I can only describe it as some fear mongering on our phone interview about HR1.
Of course.
And it's just voting rights act. It's just common sense American.
Republicans are afraid of voting rights anything, right? Like at this point, right? Like this is the great truth of our lifetime, that people like me, sort of Latin skinned people that came along in the 60s and 70s, along with darker skinned folks and along with immigrants, all of that this white thing of all we saw in Charlottesville, all of that represents the ugliness of that, would be like, it is receding. Whiteness is receding in our culture, in our country, in voting. That's just a fact. And the people that can't handle that, the richest people, they are literally, dare I say, going to their grave with that, right? Like that's not going to change.
And Governor Ehrlich, he said he's, very, very happy the Republicans are now the party of the working class. It used to be the country club Republican Party. He said he was very happy with that. That's, let's be honest. I mean, that's really because they find they're able to manipulate that whiteness into voter turnout.
Well, you see that, Ron.
These people not voting their economic interests.
I mean, just yesterday, Jim. I mean, listen, I'd love to have. Well, we'll reach out to Governor Ehrlich and we'll have fun. It'll be spirited. I couldn't disagree with him more on that. I mean, we get along fine. We have a lot of mutual friends, but I think he's clearly wrong on HR1.
I'd love to have Bob Ehrlich on. I'd love to have Bob Ehrlich on.
They fear monger it, which is, as you said, it's a great term. And just yesterday, they try these what I call last war playbook. To me, where Republicans are stuck right now is they're stuck like they always criticize generals, that generals want to fight the last war. I think Republicans are trying to fight the last war.
Yeah.
For example, Jim Jordan puts out a tweet. Democrats want to raise your taxes. Republicans don't. And then he got obliterated on Twitter because people kept saying, well, Congressman, I don't make $400,000 a year. So when Bob Ehrlich says we're the party of the working class, the only way to pay, that the president is suggesting paying for this infrastructure bill is to raise taxes on those who make $400,000 and more. Well, I don't know many people who make $400,000, and it's certainly not the working guy like Nestor's dad who grabbed his lunch pail every day to go to the point. And on voting rights, they want to get into all this silliness about, well, look, Colorado might be more restrictive. New York might have fewer days. It's all much ado about nothing because you come back and say, wait a minute. Did you or did you not drastically reduce the number of drop boxes in Georgia in this bill? And that's the one I tell people.
Well, the lines around in Milwaukee was disgraceful.
Forget all the other jibber jabber. Okay. You've created, and I would say to Governor Ehrlich and Ron Chumpy, first of all, you've created a crisis over something that doesn't exist. There is no voter fraud. I would remind even our Trump listeners that Donald Trump formed a commission as soon as he was elected president to look into voter fraud in 2016. They had to disband because they had to come back and tell the president there wasn't any. There is no voter fraud in the United States of America. So therefore, all this stuff about voter ID, all directed at people of color, the bottom line is what Nestor said, what he said so clear. Republicans, for some reason, want to go down this rabbit hole of making it harder for people to vote. Now, I'll suggest, and then I'll shut up, they may win the battle, but I suggest they end up losing the war. What do you say, Ron Cassie?
Yeah, I think, Republicans have long considered themselves to be patriots and constitutionalists. I mean, the country's founded on democracy. I mean, if you're not for voting rights, how are you, on board with the American form of democracy? I mean, that's what the country's founded on. So part of the problem, and I'm sure Nestor covering sports alone, when you're a journalist, when people are disingenuous and acting in bad faith and telling knowing falsehoods, whether it's about the crowd size of the inauguration or about voter,
or the crowd size at a baseball game, which they've been beefing up for 30 years, right? Literally,
or voting fraud. When you're being disingenuous and lying about that, how are we really supposed to trust that you're operating in good faith about anything? But to your point about the last war, I don't know why Republicans, the handwriting is on the wall. Why aren't they supporting infrastructure? Why aren't they Eisenhower, who authorized the Highway Act, right? Like in the big infrastructure plan. These infrastructures are pro-business, right? Pro-growth, pro-competition, pro-American capitalism agenda. I mean, that's what great airports, great trains, great mass transit, highways, bridges do. They enable our businesses to compete and grow around the world. So I don't know why they can't shift, and why they're still fighting these last wars, as you put it.
One of the interesting thing is there's no white, black, right, left, east, west, north, south person that has been anywhere in this country at any point doesn't realize we have some infrastructure issues. You know that, like, old cities, decaying bridges, wherever you live, doesn't matter whether you're in Iowa, Alabama, on a farm, in Texas, in a city, that you see we're getting old and we need to fix stuff. And that should be a very obvious thing and that we have to pay for it, and you get to pay me now or pay me more later.
Well, Nestor, and you don't have to go very far to see this is a terrific example of where, Ron, where I think they're so short-sighted. They want to argue whether or not expansion of broadband is infrastructure. That to me is one of the strangest. And you know who's affected by that? The Trump voter in the red states. And you you don't have to go very far, folks, in our listening audience. Drive out I-83 to Moncton, to Hereford, to Parkton in Baltimore County. Pull over and try to get a Wi-Fi signal. It is not easy. It was very difficult for children in that affluent section of Baltimore County to get Wi-Fi signal. So of course, expansion of broadband matters in Oklahoma and in Kansas and in Iowa. They're drawing these, and they also get hamstrung, it seems to me. They've lost what was their most, and this is of course what Joe Scarborough burst a vein over 2 or 3 times a week. They've lost their right to talk about fiscal responsibility because they passed a $1.9 trillion tax cut for the rich that exploded the deficit. So it's very difficult, right?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with you. I think part of this is, Don and I are old enough that, that like this, the idea of, supply side economics and trickle down economics has been exposed over 50 years. We just know it doesn't work. And so being fiscally responsible was always basically, right, a euphemism to cut taxes, to cut social programs, to cut, as a way of sending money to the top 1% and top 10%. So that's been, I think, exposed repeatedly, just on data.
Absolutely.
And
but not accepted by and large by the rank and file.
No, they still put it out there, which is amazingly, but it's, it's easily debunked. But, when you see every time, there's the Bush tax cuts, the Trump tax cuts, the Reagan tax cuts, and, going back, and, then as soon as the Democrats are in power, it's all of a sudden they're fiscally conservative. We see the exploding deficits under Reagan, under Bush's, under Trump. And then as soon as the Democrats, so, by the third time, right? Like just in my lifetime, by the third time this happens, you're like, come on,
Yeah, last time we had a balanced budget was Bill Clinton. So, I mean, and Steny Hoyer shared a chart with Nestor and me when he was on.
Well, the military budget always goes through the roof historically when Republicans are running the show.
Correct.
Yeah,
and it's just right.
That's
ahead,
a
Ron.
part of the large conversation too. I think it's I'm going to make a little bit of a leap here, but it's a little bit comparable to the discussions in Baltimore about the police budget, which has tripled since 1980. Why, like, Parks and Recs has been flat for 30 years. The police budget has tripled in Baltimore in 30 years. And so when you run as, the pro-defense or the pro-public safety candidate, candidates exploit that to their benefit over and over again. Despite what the results may show or what the hard thinking is. And it's a tough sell. It's tough. Sometimes it's nuanced, whether you're a journalist or a candidate or somebody to make these points. But I think I think some of the charts are just indisputable as far as the national GOP about the direction of wealth inequality, about who benefits from tax cuts. And in reality, like I said, I just can't imagine how you're not in favor of broadband or, mass transit, world class, or more research and development, more public research and development. I mean, we see how great, like with the vaccine American companies do, like how our research and development, our university, if the United States really shines, and we're right, it's our universities are really still the top in the world, right? That's really where we have our advantage. And that kind of supporting the kind of research that universities do inevitably leads to new breakthroughs for businesses. All the universities have their entrepreneurial wings where the PhDs take the research and form a business in a company, and venture capitalists, and everything from the hybrid engine came out of like University of Maryland research.
Right. No, I mean, I think there are multiple examples, Ron. As you said, it's going to be an interesting time. We know that our friend Barry Glassman out there in Harford County is taking a look at that race, wondering whether a true traditional Republican can take on Andy Harris in a primary. We've had Heather Mazier on. I remind folks, it is Mazier. We asked her, Nestor was great. He said, please pronounce it. She said, I know people think it's Mazur and Mazier. It's Mazier. And she's going to be, she's probably more progressive than most folks in that district, but she's an aggressive campaigner, as you know. And if it is Heather Mazier against Andy Harris, he's going to have to be
loud, right? I mean,
and he's going to have to work. He's going to have to go out and again, we're with Ron Cassie, senior editor, Baltimore Magazine. Hey, Ron, before we let you out of here, your book's been out now, I don't know, maybe almost a year. If you love Baltimore, it'll love you back. I mean, just a wonderful book. As you go about and still talk to people, are there particular one or two stories that keep coming up that really people say to you, man, I love that one. I mean, I know Nestor loved the Danny Wiseman.
No, I like the one where I beat Wiseman in bowling. That's the one I like.
Are there stories that people mention to you more than others?
It's, honestly, it's what Nestor said. People have personal connections to so many of the stories. People will see like, the Institute of Notre Dame, the annual basketball game they have, and they've gone to school there, or they know Danny Wiseman, or they know people in the book, or they know they grew up.
Is that the Mercy IND game you're talking about?
Yeah.
I've attended 7 or 8 of those. I covered high school basketball.
Yeah. So
I had a really bad crush on Rosemary Kosorik, so everybody knows that. That's not, everybody knows that.
Yeah. So it's those real personal things that people that resonate with people, that they know. People like Marvin Thorpe, who teaches kids to swim in his Woodlawn backyard pool. He and his father, his father's passed, but he and his father have been doing it for 30 plus years. Have taught tens of thousands of kids to swim. So they'll be like, I sent my kids to Marvin, And,
well, I would tell people that you got Mother's Day coming up. You've got Father's Day coming up. You're looking for a great read and something that I guarantee you, your mom or dad will love. Ron Cassie, if you love Baltimore, it will love you back. It's a page turner.
We're going to get a crab cake with you too. I mean, that's nothing more Baltimore than that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, Ron, we'll keep reading. What do you got coming down the pipe? I mean, what are you working on right now for the next
Great
Baltimore
question.
Magazine? What do you
What's
have
next?
Yeah, what's next? I think you're gonna like the this next month's cover issue, the May cover. I think you guys may. I'd love to come back and talk about the issues that are on the cover.
You're not going to even give us a little sneak peek, are you?
It's about politics in the city and the state. I'll say that, and we don't want to cover stories that are like that. So I think it'll resonate with a lot of people.
All right, Max Weiss, we're coming back for
Max,
you.
We're
back for Ron.
She better play the cello next time. Let her know that. Ron Cassie can be found anywhere journalism can be found, his books, as well as at Baltimore Magazine and here at Baltimore Positive. On behalf of my friend and former Baltimore County Executive Don Muller, we can't wait to get back out to State Fair. I'm going to be having a crab cake there. It's true in May. We're going to start our crab cake tour at Fadley's. We're going to Costas, and then we're coming out into the community. Pizza John's in Essex. We're coming for your crab cakes as well. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, having wise conversations here and keeping it intelligent. We are Baltimore Positive.